I'm giving you the dictionary definition. And by the way, if you find this show interesting, email me or call me and give me your email address and I will send you this article. This article is extraordinary and it's got sources, so much source material, you won't believe it. So the dictionary definition, dictionary.com. Stress is a specific response by the body to a stimulus as fear or pain that disturbs or interferes with the normal physiological equilibrium of an organism, which is to say, it messes you up.
Perfectly put. I know we use that word a lot. I'm stressed. Thank you. So in the past, I know you've told us about post-traumatic stress, and you have told us how your own experience of dealing with stress hormones and why they are so dangerous.
Yeah, the real problem with allowing yourself to be stressed, allowing yourself to continue to get more and more stressed, and not acquiring the tools and skills, whether they're the ones I teach or anyone else teaches, in order to transform stress. The reason this is so dangerous is that we end up with adrenal exhaustion. And I have been there, and it is a long road back. And it's a long road back. Some people never even know that there's a possibility. So they end up with all sorts of emotional disturbances, all sorts of emotional malfunctions. Truly, people you meet who are very angry, adrenal stress. People who are very, very sad, usually it's adrenal stress. People who spend their lives very, very frightened or have been frightened over a long period of time, adrenal stress. So when we're talking about survivors of anything, whether they're veterans, whether they're Holocaust survivors, it doesn't matter. Domestic violence, people who are living in shelters, who have lived in shelters, we're talking about people who are highly, highly likely to have adrenal exhaustion. And what happens is the body uses up adrenal cortisol. It stops producing enough of the feel-good brain chemistry. And so people have no choice but to feel frightened, angry, and or sad. And then those of us who feel well, what happens to us? We suffer when we're around them. Because it's pretty difficult to be around somebody who's frightened, angry, or sad, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Now, can you please tell us more about the fight or flight response, and where does that really come from?
What's so interesting about this, many of you know, this comes from our caveman ancestors. Yeah, it made perfect sense that if some huge, scary animal is suddenly appearing in front of you, you've got to run and get out of there as fast as you possibly can. You know, a saber-toothed tiger, a bear, whatever it is. So you have to be able to flee first and think later. Or fight if it's an animal that you're strong enough to fight, or you have enough of you, enough of the caveman tribe, and enough weapons, you know, spears and harpoons and whatever. Okay, fine. But that's not the world we inhabit anymore. We don't live like that. So therefore, for us, most of the things that happen to us, except maybe a car coming into your lane, but most of the other things, you'd be far better served if you could stop and think clearly. And here's the scary thing. Your ability to be rational is horrifically impacted by these stress hormones. You lose the ability to think straight. And you're going to hear more about this. And here's the big deal. This is not you. This is your brain chemistry hijacking you. And that's what you have to figure out. It hijacks you. Once in a blue moon, you're lucky as a result of getting out of there fast enough. That worked. But most of the time, people just flee or they fight, and it can be a disaster.
I guess our biggest concern would be to stay calm in a storm.
Very true. That's it.
Thank you. And what about the problem with people who are in abusive relationships? Often they really don't know when the yelling or the danger will happen. And so how does this affect our stress hormones?
This is one of the most important pieces of information I ever received. Because my father would yell horrifically a couple of times a year. That's all. But every other day, I waited for it. So 363 days, nothing much was going on in my home, except I was in a fight or flight mess, which over time had a horrific impact on me. And I've spoken to lots and lots of people who've had something similar or much worse, and they will tell you the same story, because you never know when the axe is going to fall. So what happens is your body is living on cortisol. Adrenal cortisol is the stress hormone. It blocks the production of dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, all the other feel-good brain chemicals that are called neurotransmitters, most of them. And then over time it gets worse and worse. So just know that if you're in a home and you are the parent who's doing this, you got to get help. If you're the other adult in the house, you got to call me and I'll teach you how to motivate that person to get help. If you're the child who happens to be watching this show, call me and I will show you how to motivate the parent or adult who isn't violent or screaming, how to turn it around. Because there's a solution to all of this. You just haven't heard that there is. So now I'm telling you.
Boy, what a horrid way to live, walking on broken glass. Oh my. Now, can you please explain to us about the stressors, like time pressure or noise, and how they really affect our decision making?
So, from this article, when stressors are constantly present or anxiety about possible stress is high, stress levels may become chronically elevated. And there is much scientific evidence that proves that both acute and chronic stress affect the ability to think straight. There you go. And it is really dangerous to make decisions when you're not thinking clearly. Really dangerous.
I just gave somebody that advice today, Susan. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you.
Now, I know there's a connection between stress and being able to actually decide what is safe to do and what is dangerous, what is a dangerous risk, actually. So please explain what this is about.
Well, it's very interesting, and later in the show we'll talk about how certain things men and women do the same under stress and certain things men and women don't do the same. But the bottom line is that your ability to think straight has nothing to do with your rational mind when you're calm and peaceful and everything's going fine. And so when you're under stress, you have to know this so you don't listen to that little voice in your head and just go jumping off the diving board, because there isn't always water in the pool. So the most important thing that we're telling you tonight is you have to know this, you have to understand this, and you have to stop being triggered and jumping. So it's like if a doctor hits your knee with a rubber hammer, the doctor knows that if your response is healthy, you're going to kick him. You're going to kick out. So what does the doctor do? He gets out of the way before he uses the hammer. He stands here. He doesn't stand there. So you have to understand in the same way. Oh, I know now, because I watched the show, that when I'm under stress, I can't make a decision. If there are certain things that may happen, I need to make my decision first. Earthquake, duck, cover, hold, right? You've heard that? If you've got a piano, that's a good place to hide. If you've got a desk, hide under there. If you've got a platform bed with a lip, hide under there. Duck under there, right? Then you cover yourself with a pillow, a blanket, your hands, whatever you've got, and then you hold until the shaking subsides. But you're not going to do it if you don't memorize this and practice this. Fire drills. Ever been in a fire drill in school? They have you do it and do it and do it and do it so that, heaven forbid, if there's a fire in the school, it's automatic. What does automatic mean? Your brain has created wiring, neural pathways that don't require you to figure it out in the moment. And this is really, really important because humans can't figure it out in the moment when they're under stress. Nobody can.
Thank you, Susan. That's a lot to take in. Very helpful. Now, is this the same for men and women? Because I know that you've really taught us the most brain function has nothing to do with males or females except for color blindness.
Well, there is evidence that says that the way that men and women learn from danger is very, very different. And when you think of how many more soldiers of every stripe, every version, every flavor are men than women, I don't believe it's just because women were not allowed in the military for a long time. I don't believe it's that. I believe it's because of this differentiation in the way men and women respond to stress. And I believe that that is, for most women and men, hardwired from the days of being a caveman, that the woman stayed in the cave with the old and the young, and the men went out to kill, if possible, the dangerous animal that was threatening them. So this is, and even if 100 years from now, 500 years from now, 10,000 years from now, there's less in this going on in the men versus women, I still believe that one day they will find out that it has to do with what was required for the human race to survive. It's probably just that simple.
I like that. Yes, kind of like common sense, right? Now, what about learning from our mistakes, and how does stress actually affect our ability to consider the pros and the cons of our actions?
We can't. The ability to learn is just really, really, really affected. I mean, it's just changed. Again, I'll be reading some things later in the show, but the point for you to think about is this is your brain on drugs. If you ever saw that commercial, this is your brain on drugs. So that's what this is. These are drugs. When you are stressed, drugs pour into your bloodstream, you can't think straight. And if you think you're thinking straight, you're confused. And that's the interesting thing. So thinking you're thinking straight is, in fact, evidence of confusion. So you have to be very, very smart now. You have to look at things that you have to deal with in the near future. You have to prepare, you have to plan, you have to organize, and you have to figure it out. And I am only here today because I am an excellent planner and an excellent organizer. That's what has kept me alive.
And also the gift that you have given the nonviolent community of self-empathy, Susan.
Thank you.
To raise our own consciousness so that we can contribute to our collective consciousness. That is just a blessing for us. Thank you. How about telling us about the STARS model for stress?
Okay, STARS means stress triggers additional reward salience. Now, salience means a projecting object, part, or feature. So let me do it again. The STARS model, STARS, means stress triggers additional reward features. That means when you're under stress, you may think, again, not logically, not analytically, not practically, but in this confused state we get into, you may believe that there are more rewards that you're going to get. And what we find is that people under stress don't learn in a normal way. So it's great that bullying is outlawed in most schools in the United States, not to say that it doesn't happen, unfortunately, but it's outlawed because under stress, kids can't study. So a child or a young adult who's being bullied has an additional curse, which is that they're highly unlikely to do well in school.
Thank you, Susan. I'm thinking of the years that I have witnessed this and
Yeah.
stepped forward, and I hope
Yeah.
others do.
Of course.
Now, what is the difference between making a decision in a logical manner versus a chemically induced manner?
So, if you've practiced this as long as I have, how to logically analyze with the upper left part of the brain, and Fred, if you could put the whole brain model up for a moment, that would be great for everybody. Thank you. So these are the 4 kinds of thinking that humans have. And it's essential to access the rational self, the blue quadrant, when you're under stress, and get out of the red quadrant, which is the emotional part of it. But you may need the yellow section, which is outside the box thinking, and you may need lower left planning and organizing, even for small crises. Thank you, Fred. So it's really important to know that I was in this horrible car situation. The car went out of control. I'm on the 101 going north. The car is in cruise control at 68 miles an hour. I am not the world's best driver. A normal person like Gigi would have known to downshift, even though my car is an automatic. You know, you have the ability, which of course I didn't know at the time, that you can get yourself into second, you know, or even neutral, you know. But forget all that. I couldn't do any of that. But I do have really remarkable internal skills, right, from the neck up. So I was observing, you know, am I going to die, you know, doing the 4 questions of inquiry, which we've covered in other shows. You know, I'm going to die. Is that true? Well, it looks like it's true because I'm spinning out of control. What evidence do I have that I'm going to die? No, the evidence I have is that I better figure out, and it better be fast, what I'm going to do with this blankety blank car so it stops spinning. Figured it out. Go into the spin. I remember that. Now, I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want to get anybody killed. Not myself, but I sure don't want to take anybody else out. So now I guide the car into the center divider because I know if I can get from the second lane into the first lane, okay, now I'm out of trouble with those people. They're going to be okay. I decide I have no choice. I'm calming myself down. I've got to go into the center divider, and I'm 68 miles an hour. Well, I have it's a brand new car, and I've got brand new, you know, bags, and it's ever going to be great. Never having the data that at the angle that I was going into the divider, 45-degree angle, that there was no way that the airbags were all going to inflate. But it turned out it was fine because, again, my skill set was so strong, I was able to be completely relaxed. I didn't tense up at all. And as I pushed the car in that direction, the barrier stopped us. Of course, the car was totaled, but I didn't have a scratch on me. Why? Because my internal skills were so strong from years and years of practicing. This is what I'm telling you. You hear this tonight, you want to start practicing tomorrow because we never know when we're going to need it. Now, I'm sticking out into the first lane. A guy stops his truck in front of me. He comes to my window. I've got all my windows closed. I'm thinking, okay, this guy's either going to help me or kill me. How can I assess? You know what happens so many times. The person who comes you think is going to help you, and then they rape the woman a second time. So I had to really assess, and he seemed like an intelligent, sane person. He was risking his life, and he said, I want to push your car out of the way because I don't want you to get hit from behind. You know, will you do whatever it was I had to do? Put the car in neutral, I guess. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, logical analysis, I did it. Outside the box thinking, I did it. Planning and organizing, not much time to do that, but within whatever time there was, did that. And of course, my natural drift is to empathy anyway, so I didn't want anyone else to get killed. It was a fabulous success. If you could call a car accident a fabulous success, this was it. So I want you guys to know, I'm telling you the story because I want you to be able to solve your problems with as much success, and zero downside.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing, Susan. And we're all grateful that you survived without a scratch.
Thank you. Not even whiplash. Isn't that amazing?
That really is.
It doesn't seem possible, but, you know, there's God.
Above all else.
Yeah.
Now, I know, Susan, how about this? If learning is about figuring out what causes a problem and what the effect of our choices, then it sounds as if stress hormones create disasters for us, right?
They can, but that's the tricky part. So the stress hormone, I've learned how to control it over a certain amount of years. So if you are good at taking tests, as I am, you're probably someone who has learned how to control your stress response. Because obviously taking a test is stressful, right? But I learned as a very small child that I had to be able to calm myself before, during a test so I could remember the answers and do well. And I always tested very, very well. And I don't know if I still would, but luckily I don't have to take tests anymore. So that's the key. That's the key for you. You have to learn how to control this. That means practicing. That means your body, your brain is building new pathways. We call them neural pathways. And then you can handle stress and be brilliant.
What a gift, but we have to practice. Now, how does stress really cause addiction for some people? Because I know that you work with a lot of families struggling with addiction issues.
This is so fascinating. The addiction is not actually to alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, shopping, eating, whatever. I discovered years and years ago, like 20 odd years ago, that's not the actual addiction. Those are the results of the addiction. That's not what causes it. The cause, in every case I have worked on so far, is this biochemical imbalance. The adrenal cortisol is used up. The body doesn't produce enough endorphins. The body doesn't produce enough neurotransmitters. The people are actually addicted to fear, anger, and or sadness. Because haven't you noticed that most people who tell you that they have addictions, or you may just know it, are insufficiently happy, peaceful, joyous, focused? Yeah, of course. But now you finally understand why. It's their chemistry. It's not who they are. You fix the chemistry, you get amazing results in almost every case.
And that gives a lot of people hope. So call her if you have any of these issues. Or a loved one, of course. Now, Susan, how about the people who are addicts and then they, let's say, relapse? Is there a connection with stress?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So if somebody is an addict and doesn't know about this, you would do them a huge service by having them watch this show, which repeats, for the next week. So it's really important, or have them call me, or go to the YouTube channel that Gigi is going to announce at the end of the show and watch some of the shows Gigi and I have done on addiction. Because what happens is, so somebody is doing well. They're attending 12-step meetings, they've got a sponsor, their friends are helping, they're not drinking or eating too much or shopping too much or gambling at all or whatever it is. Then they lose their job. Or they found out their partner's been cheating. Or they have to find a new place to live. Or whatever. Something that they had little or nothing to do with. But boom, the law of momentum, something's going to keep going in the direction it's going until, bam, something hits it. And then what happens? Adrenal cortisol floods into their system, and their body isn't going to produce enough serotonin, dopamine, neurotransmitters, endorphins. And what's going to happen? They're going to feel frightened and or angry and or sad. And what's going to happen in this miserable cascade? They're going to be much more likely to drink. They're going to eat, or they're going to gamble, or they're going to this, that, or the other thing. We call it emotional eating, right? Those of us who aren't incredibly addicted to food, for example, we know what that's like. So you go home and you eat too much, or you eat the wrong foods, and you can control it if you're not at that level of addiction. But the only thing that separates us from the people who really struggle with addiction is brain chemistry and brain wiring. That's all. So, important to know.
Very important. We don't want to be hanging out on that slippery slope.